Hi, I'm Nasrin, the designer behind Needle Eye Patterns, and this is a sewing tutorial for my latest design, the Arezzo Blouse. In this video, I'm sewing the poofy sleeve version of this blouse, but I have another video coming up showing you how to change the sleeve to any style that you like. Check that one too. Grab your pattern at needleeyepatterns.com. The link is in the description. And if you need help printing and assembling the pattern, watch this video. I'm using a polyester satin, but any lightweight, non-stretchy fabric would work. If you're using a very slippery fabric like mine, do not cut the small pieces that needs to be fused. Just cut a big chunk of fabric, fuse it, then place the pattern on top and cut it out. Don't forget to cut the notches. For marking the dart, you can cut out the dart on the pattern first, then mark inside of the dart. Just make sure you mark on the other piece for the front as well. So for the ruffle, I'm using organza fabric. First, cut one layer of the pattern. Then for the second layer, add 53 centimeter. But if your fabric has a good side and bad side, you gotta flip the pattern first because the pieces should mirror each other. Let's start with the darts. Fold the darts in the middle. Line up the notches. Poke the pin on the line and make sure it's poking out right on the line in the other side. Now sew right on the line. All the way to the tip of the dart, then continue stitching and go off the fabric and make a long chain with the thread. I am very sorry if you're having a hard time seeing the details on this fabric. Choosing black was a huge mistake for filming, but I'll try to explain everything as much as I can to make it easy for you. And I'm not gonna choose black for tutorials anymore. Okay, so I fold the darts down, press them, and now I'm tying a knot with the thread. Make sure the knot sits close to the fabric and cut the tail. We are going to French seam the shoulders. I marked the bad side of the fabric, as you can see, then place the front on top so the bad side is touching the bad side. Pin and sew at 1/2 centimeter seam allowance. Try to open the seams flat and press. Then flip to the bad side, poke the seam out, and press again. Pin, and this time sew it at 1 centimeter seam allowance. Fold the seams towards back. I have to use a piece of cloth when I'm pressing on the good side of the fabric, otherwise I might get a shine mark from the iron. After pressing, I use this cold, heavy iron to cool down the fabric before I move it. This way the seams stay more crisp and nice. Grab 2 layers of the plackets, place them on center front, good side touching good side, Line up the edges, pin, and sew from the top to the bottom. Press the seams towards the plackets. Now grab one layer of the color and we want to line up the bottom edge, which is this line, with center back neck. Good side touching good side. Line up the notches first, then line up the corner with the placket and pin all around. Now go ahead and sew from one corner to the other corner. Push the seams up and press. I frayed the edges of the trims a little. If you like to learn how to make these fringy looking trims, I have a video for it and I'll put a link for you here. Also, in my other video, when I was making the Avero shirt, I used scallop embroidery for the edge, which turned out really cute. You can check that one too. Okay, now we have to attach them together using French seam. Now I'm going to use a second layer, which is this trim. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter because I want to show off the fringe on top of the organza. I'm going to put it on top, pin it, then change the stitch length to the longest on your machine. Then without doing the back stitch, I sew them together at the edge. So do not backstitch at the beginning nor at the end. Now you want to line up the seam and the trim with the center back collar. Then the longer side of the trim will be lined up with this notch in the middle of the placket. And you have this much extra that you need to create the ruffle with it. Pull the thread and spread the gathering evenly between the two pins. Now line up the ruffle with the edge and pin. Now for the shorter side of the trim, place the edge on the curve of the collar. Pin and repeat the steps. Now go ahead and sew them at the edge. For the other layers of the plackets and collar, we want to fold the seam allowance. So go ahead and sew a line at one edge of the placket as well as the bottom edge of the collar at 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Now have the plackets bad side up. Then fold the edge at the stitch line and press. Place the placket on the collar, good side touching good side. Make sure the folded edges are towards the middle. Pin and sew them together. Fold the seams towards the collar and press. Now you also have to fold the seam allowance on the collar and press. Place it on the shirt, good side touching good side. First, make sure the seams at the collar are lined up together, pin them. And then line up the plackets and pin all around. Now go ahead and sew all around. Now you can trim the seams. Also, at the curve, you can cut these V-shaped notches. Now flip the placket, pull the ruffles out, now you gotta decide how you want to finish the placket. You want to do top stitching like I did for the Arezzo shirts in the other video, or you want to torture yourself a little bit and stitch in the ditch for more polished look, which I'm gonna do now. So first we have to understitch the placket. You're gonna fold the seam allowances under the second layer of the placket and stitch close to the seam, which you don't need to do this if you want to do top stitching. Now poke the seams out and press. Now place the folded edge of the placket on the seam, and if you're planning to stitch in the ditch, make sure the folded edge is covering the seam a little bit, so it will be caught as you're sewing. Pin it down all around. And if you're worried about catching the fold as you're sewing, you can also hand stitch first, which is a pain, but it gives you a perfect seam. I switched the presser foot to the zipper foot and lined up the edge of the presser foot with the seam and moved the needle to right above the seam. Also, I'm holding my breath here and slowly bringing the needle down, making sure it's right in the seam. And I'm sewing as I'm praying. Stitching in the ditch is beautiful, but it's painful. When you get to the corner, lift the presser foot, turn, and continue. Perfect. Now French seam the side seams. If you'd like to get notified every time I have a new video, hit the subscribe button and press that little bell icon next to it. I have a new video every other week. Thank you. Now, for the sleeves, you gotta make a decision again. Do you want the slit to be at the seam, which is the easy way I did for the Amalfi shirt on the other video? Or you want to make your life a little bit harder and have a slit on the back of the sleeve and also learn a new thing? If yes, then right under the double notch on the sleeve, which indicates the back, place your ruler and draw a line 8 centimeters long at the hem. Cut on the line. Now cut a piece of fabric for 16 by 2.5 centimeters, and it doesn't have to be cut on the bias because we're not sewing it to a curve, it's a straight line. Then mark the center. Now open up the slit. Pin the fold of the fabric and try to make the slit a straight line. Now line up the center of the tape with the center of the slit, good side touching good side, then pin the edges. Now go ahead and sew at 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. I'm gonna have the tape facing down because when you get to the middle, you wanna make sure not to get any pucker in the sleeve. Go very slow and move the folds under the needle to get the fabric very flat. Now trim the seams. Fold them towards the tape and press. Now we want to fold the edge of the tape and place them on the seam. Pin it down. Now we're sewing close to the folded edge. Now fold the slit and sew on this little corner, just a short diagonal line. Now this is how it looks on the bad side. Fold one side of the slit and press. Then the other side goes on top. Now pin down the folded side. And we're gonna baste stitch the hem. Switch the stitch length to the longest. And without doing the back stitch, sew at the edge. Now let's French seam the sleeves. For the cuffs, we have to fold the seam allowance at one side of it. So go ahead and sew a stitch line at 1.5 centimeter. Now fold the edge on the bad side and press. Fold the cuff in half and mark the center. Then fold the sleeve at the slit and mark the center. Now line up the corner of the cuff with one side of the slit, but make sure you leave 1.5 centimeter for the seam allowance and pin. Now the other corner. Now you can line up the marks together and pin. Now you have to pull the thread on the sleeve and create the gathering until the sleeve fits to the cuff. Now we're going to sew them together. Fold the cuff in half, good side touching good side. Make sure all the seams are tucked down. Pin the edge. Now we want to sew at the edge, starting right beside the sleeve, but be careful not to catch the sleeve. Cut the corners. And now you're going to line up the folded edge of the cuff on the seam. And again, if you want to stitch in the ditch for the cuff, you have to make sure the folded edge is covering the seam a little bit. For the cap of the sleeve, we need to mark the gathering. Measure from the notch going up 10 centimeter and mark. Same thing for the other side. Now we have to baste stitch between these two marks. Backstitch at the beginning, but do not backstitch at the end. The sleeve should be good side out and the shirt should be bad side out. Place the sleeve into the armhole. Start from the armpit. Line up the two and pin. Then the notches at the front and the notches at the back. Then continue lining up the two layers all the way to the markings from each side. Now pull the loose thread on the sleeve to make the gathering. When you're spreading the gathering, make sure around the shoulder seams get the most gathering and it gets less as you're going down. When I'm sewing, I have the sleeve facing up. This way I can move around the gatherings a little bit in case they're making big pleats. Now I'm going to finish the seam with serging. When pressing, push the seams towards the sleeve and pull the fabrics a little bit to get the seam flat. Now I'm going to sew on a piece of the trim on the cuff just to match it with the ruffle. Now for the hem, I serged the edge first. Now the serging will be my guideline to double roll the edge. Now I'm going to sew close to the edge. This is a cover button kit, and this is the size I need to cut my fabric. I want to create my own buttons. This was my first time using this kit, and it was actually very easy to use. But since I don't know what to call each part of it, I'm just gonna be quiet and let you watch the steps. A beautiful button. I sewed 6 buttons on the front and 1 for each cuff, and done. You give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll promise not to use black fabric for my tutorials anymore. Promise. I'll see you next time.